Reddit by Reddit recap. What's something a teacher did at school that you're still mad about? I went to a high school that had a uniform. We were supposed to have our shirts tucked in at all times. I was walking into English class, between bells, tucking in my shirt because it came up out of my skirt while I was taking my cardigan off. My English teacher stopped me and asked, "Were you just tucking your shirt in?" I told her I was and she promptly wrote me up for having had my shirt untucked. It was utter bullshit and I lost total respect for her. In my high school we had to tuck our shirts in unless it was a sweater. I even went and made sure with a teacher it was okay and she said, "Why would you tuck a sweater in?" A few weeks later she wrote me up for not tucking in my sweater. I was not happy with her. I had shirts since your English until Y11. I always had to have it tucked in, and my tie correct, and everything else. They didn't care about the girls throwing wet tampons in the changing rooms. This happened when I was in Y7. Oh no, you get a bad note because your tie had less than 6 stripes showing. Yes, this was a rule. I had a teacher demand I change out of my yoga pants even though yoga pants weren't even against school policy. If they were banned, you bet your behind she would have started a riot. She also gave me a C on a project where we were supposed to decorate masks. Everyone else got mostly A's. Like how the yuck do you even grade something that is supposed to be artistic anyways? Mine was simple because I didn't have much money to spend on decorating it, but to this day I still believe it was better than the sparkly bullshit some kids turned in. Boy in my class, about 8 years old, had dyslexia, so one time, the teacher gave a dictation. He had spelled all the words wrong and she was really mad at him, just shouting to him in the middle of the class that he should have tried harder. He didn't do well enough, etc. He was crying and from that moment on I really hated her. My 2nd grade teacher told me I wouldn't amount to anything and would never graduate high school because I have dyslexia. Jokes on her. I graduated top of my class at my university for both my majors. Dyslexic chiming in, I just graduated college in May. Bachelor of Science and Liberal Studies. Took me a roundabout way. Didn't graduate high school. Took adult classes in my 20s. And from there I went straight into college. Kept thinking I was gonna fail everything because my whole life I had a learning disorder hanging over my head. I made honors. So excuse me why I tell that teacher ruck off. A learning disorder doesn't mean shit. But boy can the label scare you. How did you type everything right? S. Primary school teacher asked me what the biggest number possible is. I said numbers go on forever so there is no biggest number. My dad had told me that fact and it was interesting so I remembered it. The teacher told me that was stupid and proceeded to grab one of the really cheap school calculators and type in as many 9s as could fit on the display. She then held it up in my face and said there, "That's the biggest number there is." That still annoys me to this day. Holy shit. How did she graduate college? You'd be surprised. There was a guy in one of my senior level classes in college who had no idea that plants were alive. He thought they were like rocks. Yes, they are indeed like rocks. Rocks that breathe and produce food and are alive in a general sense. And I was in 5th grade and my little sister was in 2nd grade. She wanted to pick some apple blossoms for her teacher. When she presented the little bouquet to her teacher, the teacher flipped out, lectured her for 10 minutes about why she shouldn't go on people's lawns to pick flowers, then threw the blossoms away in front of her. My sister was devastated, and I found her on the playground, crying. The apple blossoms were from our apple tree, in our front yard. First and last time I had ever yelled at a teacher. Totally worth the office referral. Why is it that they will bet and do immediately that it was from someone else's tree? Dumbus. Because that teacher is a cunt. I had a teacher that was an absolute cunt. She was probably early 70s in probably 2007. She was the cheer coach from like 1970 to 1990, which is when I behind whom she became obese and at some point took up being the treat teacher. I was a football player. Every time we had a game she would tell the cheerleaders who were cheering for our game. She would say, "Ladies, you have a big night ahead of you. You are excused from homework." I would reply, "I am playing the game they are cheering for. Can I get my homework excused? We have to be there an hour before the cheerleaders. And we have a team meeting after the game and showers. We leave an hour after they do. And every time she would reply, "You know I don't support that barbaric sport," even though she supports cheering for it. "You will have your homework turned in on time tomorrow. If you can't balance football and homework, then quit the team." Teacher got up in the middle of my presentation, took my paper out of my hand, and in front of the entire class told me that I had plagiarized my abandonment from the internet. The thing is, we didn't have the internet at that time at my house. I had worked through the entire abandonment while talking about my ideas with my dad. It was super embarrassing. Made me feel better to learn that the next day my dad went into class and yelled at the teacher in the staff room in front of all his peers. I didn't have a problem with that teacher after that. Some teachers have a hard time accepting that some children who are articulate or smarter than they are. This is too good. Must have cheated is their default setting. When I was in 7th and 8th grade, we were required to write a paper and make a display for our state history fair based on a topic of our choosing, so long as it was relevant to our state's history. In addition to the typical letter grade, papers and projects were reviewed by judges to be compared at a regional and then, if chosen, at regional, state level. I don't remember if there was any monetary reward or if you just got a ribbon or something, but either way it was kind of a big deal. Anyway, at some point in one of the papers I wrote, I used the word streamlined as a descriptor. My history teacher told me I needed to change it, reason being to the effect of the word being above an 8th grade reading level and the judges reviewing my paper well better do my plagiarize it and would disqualify my paper as a result. My teacher was an alright guy and didn't normally discredit his own students like that, so I knew it was an out of his hands thing and I don't blame him for it. All this to say, it's fucking stupid that administrations can't accept students being ahead of the curve and actively punish them for being so. Question mark? Isn't the purpose of such a content to find and reward ahead of the curve students? This baffles me to no end. Little me was obsessed with two things: dinosaurs until I saw Jurassic Park, and space. I was obsessed. In 3rd grade we had an abandonment where we had to talk about orbits. I wrote examples like the moon orbits the earth orbits the sun, and the sun orbits the Milky Way. My teacher gave me a D and refused to listen to me that what I had said was true. We didn't have computers in the classroom, so there was no way to look it up. I tried to bring a book with it the next day, but she blew me off. Joke's on her though, because I'm about to get my PhD in astronomy. Edit. I wasn't quite clear in what I wrote. She didn't believe the sun orbiting around the center of the Milky Way. She wasn't anti-Copernican. Today I learned the sun orbits the Milky Way. Just remember that you're standing on a planet that's evolving and revolving at 900 miles an hour, that's orbiting at 19 miles a second. So it's reckoned a sun that is the source of so much power. The sun and you and me, and all the stars that we can see, are moving at 6 million miles a day in an outer spiral arm, 200,000 miles an hour, round a galaxy we call the Milky Way. Our galaxy itself contains 300 billion stars. It's 100,000 light years side to side. It bulges in the middle, 16,000 light years thick, but out by us it's just 3,000 light years wide. We're 30,000 light years from galactic central point. We go round every 200 million years, and our galaxy is only one of millions and billions in this amazing and expanding universe. So remember, when you're feeling very small and insecure, how amazingly unlikely is your birth, and pray that there's intelligent life somewhere up in space, because there's bugger all down here on Earth. Rapidly trying to figure out how to include this in my PhD defense. Love that movie. They thought I was doing coke in class at the age of 14. Still bitter about that 5-day in-school suspension. What kind of school did you go to that a 14-year doing coke was a thought? Same school that 11th graders are doing heroin in the bathroom. Ah, Glasgow High. Some teacher called me a waste of time and space during the end of school performance because I was too shy to sing. I didn't pick a singing role. I was like 10-11 years old. That is 100% the teacher's fault. I was once told I had broken the computer and felt scared using a computer ever since. 17 years married to a very talented software developer and 15 years in a technical role, and I only just have my confidence back. One time I opened like 50 Firefox windows and the IT person at my school was so dumb she thought it was broken. The next day there was a note on it that said this computer is out of order because a student intentionally didn't ask me anything, get it? I went the other way though, and 10 years later I'm in IT. Homework in 2nd grade was to learn our parents' real names instead of mom and dad. I came in and told the class my mom had a different last name than me. The teacher said no. Her last name is Jutsu like yours and your daddy. That's what happens when you get married. I told her that it was just me and my mom and that my daddy never lived with us. She told the class that meant they needed to pray for me and my mommy because we were going to hell. That was my last day at that school. Not nearly as bad as yours, but I had a classmate in 8th grade called Susie. That was her given name. It was what was on her birth certificate. It's what she was always called. She wasn't Susan or Suzanne. Just Susie. I guess she was named for a relative that only went by that name. Well, 99% of teachers had no issue with this. All her paperwork said Susie. She wanted to be called Susie. All her friends and family called her Susie. Really not a big deal. Until Sister H came along. Sister H insisted that Susie was not her real name and that it had to be Susan or Suzanne and that Susie was lying. Susie was like, no. Susie is my given legal name. It's what's on my birth certificate and it's what's on my baptismal certificate. Sister H was not having that and would call her Susan. Why this was Sister H's hill to die on I will never know. But it culminated in the principal getting involved. Susie's mother coming to the school and Sister H not calling Susie by her name for the rest of the year. It would be upsetting if it weren't so incredibly ridiculous. I had this experience both personally and with my friend and ex. My first name is hyphenated, but I only go by the first name, which I always would mention first day of class politely after they'd do attendance. One teacher refused to call me by the one name and insisted on my whole name because that's your legal name and I have the right to use it. He did this to several students including the above mentioned friends Kate and Drew. Neither were Catherine, Kathleen etc or Andrew. Just Kate and Drew. This was also high school BTW. He was awful all around. Just an unpleasant educator who really should have never pursued education as a career. This teacher fell off a ladder 2 years later and before we graduated and died. No one at school went, and it came out later that other teachers had issues with him calling them whatever he felt they should be called. Such a hill to literally and figuratively die on. Edit. Spelling. I will call kids whatever they want. Basically. Except for right after 9/11 a kid wanted to be called Jihad. Totally not found anywhere in his actual name. I didn't make a big deal out of it. I just continued calling him his regular name. This was after I had known him for like a year, so I basically said, oh, I will never remember that. You have always been to me. Best comment of the day. In my art class in 6th grade I had to do a project that was pretty much just gluing pieces of paper to a bigger piece of paper, but it had to have radial balance. I finished early and went to her to turn it in and find out what I should do next. It was a simple design, but it was exactly what she asked for. When I told her I was finished, she looked at it for a second and said, "No, you're not. Look at all the effort put into all of those that are finished." She pointed to a bunch of projects that were hung up to fray and told me to go back and finish. I ended up gluing a bunch of pieces on, still following her rules, and it ended up look worse in the process. She gave me a C in the end and wrote unfinished on the back. The thing that sucked even more was that I had and still have social anxiety, and it took me a lot to have courage to just stand up and say that one sentence. I don't think I spoke to anyone at school other than my friend for a while because of the embarrassment.